Choosing a school for your children can be a tough decision, but in a place like Hong Kong, it's not just tough, it can be complicated, stressful and expensive. The quality of education here is world class, but the spots are often limited. It can make for a stressful start for newcomers to the region. It can also be a disincentive for those considering the move. Wendy Bauman and her family moved to Hong Kong last October. Her husband was posted here from China, and it was an exciting prospect to live in yet another city in Asia. Finding a home was easy, but finding a school for her two children was a challenge.
At the beginning, it's definitely overwhelming because you don't know, you have no idea, it's not transparent. The whole system is not transparent at all, and you feel a little bit at the mercy of the schools, basically. So you submit your application, not knowing, what they're looking for, whether your child will fit or whether your child will be even considered for an interview.
To make things a little easier, Wendy Bauman employed a consultant to guide her through this often complicated enrolment process.
Actually, we were recommended to apply to at least 6, but we only applied to 3. We took the risk. Maybe it was a bit of naivety. We thought 3 should be plenty. But when we came and people were like applying to, some parents applied to more than 10 schools. And I think 3 was pretty much on the low end of the scale.
Faced with the daunting process of getting your children in school, many new arrivals hire expert help. Ruth Benny runs the site Top Schools Hong Kong, advising expats on the best approach for enrolments.
Some families would do what we call a scattergun approach and apply to 15 schools. I had one couple that met me who'd already spent 50,000 Hong Kong dollars on application fees. That's not necessary.
It's now peak season, with school interviews underway and the applications being processed for the new term starting in September. With an average of 10 children applying for every spot at an international school, the availability is limited.
Every day I have a family calling up, we've got 5-year-old twins, we're arriving in May, can we get them into a school? That's so difficult, it's so late.
The challenge is also the demand from local Hong Kong families. A report by McKinsey on world education released last year noted the proportion of local students taking up places had increased from around 11% in 2001 to 26% in the primary level and 23% in secondary. With local families defined as those not holding any overseas passport, the numbers are likely to be much higher.
The demand is towards top private international schools and more families can afford it. In Hong Kong, unlike Singapore, we don't have any restriction on who can attend international schools. So we have a lot of local Cantonese families who prefer to choose international schooling for their children, and there's no restriction on that. So Australian families, British families, American families who are arriving here, sometimes at short notice, are looking at schools that are full.
So how does the process work? Putting in an application is the easiest part, but families are often faced with huge waiting lists. Those lucky enough to get in early or have a corporate or private debenture have a better chance of getting an interview. That process too took Wendy Bauman by surprise.
The first interview that we actually went to, we were completely shocked because no one had told us what it would be like. So we went there and it was a hall full of maybe more than 100 children. And then they go off for 1.5 hours. You don't know what they're doing and how they're doing and whether they're crying or not crying. And the parents stay behind.
But getting an interview doesn't guarantee a spot at an international school. It's simply the first part of an assessment, with some children younger than 2 getting a call-up.
Yeah, a 1-year-old, 18-month-old is invited for interview for a 2-year-old program. It can create a lot of stress for the parents, but on the other hand, if you're a school and you're receiving 10 applications for every place, how do you select the children if you don't invite them in for interview? I don't really see any other way.
It's a long-winded, emotional journey for parents, and it can also be expensive. And when applying to a number of schools, that cost can add up.
It's about 3,000 Hong Kong dollars per application, which is about what, $400 or something. And then some of the schools they charge an additional fee for for taking the interview. So you submit the application form and you submit a check for $400 US, and then when they decide to give you an interview, then you have to pay another 3,000 Hong Kong dollars in order to be interviewed.
The Australian International School is one of the more established. It started with 25 children almost 2 decades ago and now has more than 1,100 at its Kowloon campus.
I think it's grown up. It's very much a quality institution now. Our academic results are outstanding. I think we're well known for good Australian breadth of curriculum, which is people find desirable because it's an all-round education, and yet where there's ability for the arts and sports as well as the academics, so it's a very good product.
Leonie Drew has been the co-head of school for 5 years and knows how difficult the enrolment process can be. The Australian school gives Australian and New Zealand passport holders priority, but like the other international schools here, the waiting list is still long.
It's been that way for a number of years now. So here at our school, primary years are very difficult to get into. Not every primary year level, but there are long wait lists at most of the year levels. In secondary, it's much easier to be able to move into, but you can apply for up to 2 years ahead for application. But of course, when companies are moving people, they don't necessarily know 2 years ahead that they're going to be moving.
It's a problem noted by the government, which is looking for sites for schools to open up or expand. The Australian International School is one of those candidates and is seeking another campus to try and cut the waiting lists.
Little pockets of land or disused schools are offered from time to time. We have bid twice for availability of sites, but been unsuccessful for various reasons.
What is guaranteed is the standard and quality of education here. Hong Kong has been judged to have one of the best education systems in the world. In international reports such as the OECD Program for International Students, the results are consistently near the top. And the local system is considered ahead of the game, but it too is competitive.
If you think there's pressure on international schools, and if you think it's difficult to get into international school, try getting into a good local school. It's 10 times more competitive.
As more local families seek spots in the international school systems, there appears to be no solution in sight. Apply early is often the best advice. Wendy Bauman's children, Sebastian and Charlotte, were both accepted into good schools, but she's since decided to move them to one that better suits her family's criteria.
Reputation is one thing, and I think whether it fits your child and your family's education values is another thing. And so what we found is, even though we've got into a desirable school, it's not necessarily a school that actually fits our family.